Hey everybody, welcome back to Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And this video, we're going to talk about the whole concept of recall and an analog console and the lack of recall. And it seems to be one of the biggest points that people make when I read through all the comments on other videos. It's all about, well, it doesn't have recall, it doesn't have recall, it's not worth the money, it doesn't have recall, stay in the box, it doesn't have recall. It's the number one issue, and I get it, it's a good issue. But what I like to say, and I want to talk about a couple of things about recall, and then I'm going to do a follow-up video where I'll actually show you how long it takes to recall this setup. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes to recall the board and recall the gear. We'll talk about that more in detail, but I want to talk about something that no one really talks about, and I want to share my experience with you. So once again, I will timestamp kind of the subjects or kind of the topics down below, so you don't have to sit through the whole video, because it could be a longer video, but I think this is good information and something that I want to kind of give people something to think about when we talk about the issue of recall. How to avoid recalls. And I want to tell you about my experience with recalls, both in the box and now with analog, and just talk to you about it on how, by doing a better job as an engineer on the front end of a project before you even take on a project, how that really helps you avoid recalls. So I'm going to take you through the process of how I work with clients and how I book them, not only when I work in the analog domain, but the way I've been working in the digital domain for years. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, if you like what you see in this video, hit that subscribe button. Also go out to mixingmusicanalog.com and give me the old thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe, right? And also now I think there's some feature here called the Super Thanks. If you really want to help support the channel, help support what I do. If you find this channel helpful to you in any way, feel free to help support by clicking the links below. I really do appreciate it. So let's talk about recall. And I'm not sure what the title of this video is going to be yet. I'm sure it's going to be somewhat clickbaity, and it's going to grab your attention, and it's going to make all the haters start typing the nasty comments before we even get started, because there's enough of you out there that love to do that, and I still don't understand why. But let's talk about this. So the number one question, or one of the number one things that come up around the origin and consoles in general, here's kind of the question. I wrote it down, and I want to kind of paraphrase what people ask and what people say about this. So the first thing they'll say, with the questions that come up about the SSL origin specifically, because that's what I have, is the lack of recall, right? The lack of recall. What happens when you need to tweak a mix for a client a week, a month, or maybe even a year later? What happens, Dave? You're done with the mix, you're on to the next project, and now you have to go back and recall. A week later, a month later, the client wants you to turn up the hi-hat or turn down the background vocals. What do? What a pain in the ass it is to recall. It's a big thing. My answer is, I don't recall. I can, but I don't. And you say, well, what does that mean? We're going to get into that. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about how I avoid recalls. It's more than what the console can or can't do, but it's more about the type of client that you take on and how you prepare to work on a project that will help you avoid recalls. So first, let's talk about analog consoles in general and the recall feature, okay? So as of the recording of this video in the spring of 2022, to my knowledge, and I've looked, there is no analog console by any manufacturer on the market that has total recall for anything even close to less than 100 to 150,000 bucks. There isn't one. There isn't a console on the market, analog console, that has 64 faders, 32 EQs, and all the features that this Origin has with recall. No such thing. Now, SSL makes the AWS series, which I've talked about in other videos. That has Recall Assist, which is an assist software, but you still have to physically manually touch all the pots, but it keeps you from maybe having to take pictures of the board, which is what I do. That starts at 106 or 110,000, and you don't have half the faders that you have here. The Neve Genesis series, some of the Neves, I think like the Neve Black, Genesis Black, has some recall and some DAW control. However, not with 32 faders, it doesn't, not for anything less than 150 grand. Not even close. And people will say, well, yes, it does. Well, no, it doesn't. The console that the Neve Genesis Black has for 50 or 60 grand is 24 faders, and it only gives you 8 preamps, and I don't even think it gives you 8 digitally controlled EQs and dynamics. Those are extra. I looked at a Neve Genesis Black. To get 32 EQs digitally controlled with 32 faders, you're well over $100,000. I don't think API makes anything like that. I think maybe in their more flagship consoles that they do, okay? Trident doesn't have a console that I'm aware of that has recall in it at any price point. Maybe they do, but again, you are talking about well over 100 grand. If you want something like an SSL Duality, which is like their flagship, I guess, I think they start at 140 and 50 grand. And depending on how many faders, and I know it's somewhat modular, and some of these manufacturers make modular consoles where you can add buckets of 8 stuff to your console, and may have some kind of recall assist, you're way up there at 150,000 bucks plus. If someone knows of a console that has total recall, analog desk, not a PreSonus Studio Live, not a Behringer mixer, those are digital mixers, those are different, okay? A true analog desk that has recall for anything under 100,000, please email me the link, because I will be glad to look at that, because I'd be interested, right? But as of the recording of this video, there is no such thing. So if this was what, 50,000 bucks? So for $100,000, is recall something that I'm willing to pay $100,000 for? I know there's some other features, but that's one of the big ones. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So if you want to work on an analog console, for anything less than that, the recall process has to be like old school. And this is what I do. We take 5 pictures of the board with an iPhone, high resolution pictures that I can zoom in and see every setting clearly. And I take about 4 or 5 pictures of the racks where all the gear setting is. And I keep it all on a spreadsheet as part of the package of my session. So if I have to go back, I can. How long does it take? About 45 minutes. Depends on how many tracks. If I had to recall 32, probably around 45 minutes to do this in the gear. And again, I'll do a separate video on that. So that's what it takes. So if you want to work analog, recall is an issue. But is it really an issue? Is it really an issue? So in all the years, and again, I don't know how many records I've mixed in the box over the last 10 or 15 years. How many hundreds? I mean, I don't know if it's many thousands. I never counted them. But it's many, many hundreds. The amount of times that I've had to go back after a client signs off a mix and I give them the files and had to go back a week or a month later, 0. I don't think it's ever happened. I can't remember it ever happening where I had to go back and recall. And you say, well, how is that? Because a lot of people say, I need to be able to go back 2 months later if someone wants to turn up the hi-hat. Really? Maybe it's part of the preparation on the front end, and we're gonna get into that. So I've never had to do it. Now on this console, by using photos and stuff, I can recall it if I need to, but I don't. I haven't yet. I'm sure there'll be a day where I'll have to. I'll certainly have to do it when I do the video for you, but I don't have to do it. And I don't plan to have to do it. My goal is not to figure out a way to get better at recalls. My goal is not to have to do recalls. And you say, well, how do you do that? It all has to do for me, in the way I used to do it in the box and the way I do it now on a hybrid setup. It all has to do with the way you book the client and the way you start the project and the due diligence that I do on the front end to try to avoid that situation ever coming up. So I want to talk to you about how that process works for me, and maybe it'll help some of you if you're someone who works with clients or just starting to work with clients or thinking about working with clients. Maybe it helps you in some way. It's worked for me. The process is tweaked over the years, but this process I'm going to talk you through is the same thing that I've been doing when I was mixing all with plugins, to try to make sure I don't have to have that problem. And now I doubly make sure, because on analog it does take a lot longer to do. So what is the process on how I book clients? So here's kind of how it goes. I'm going to walk you through it. I think it's like 5 or 7 steps here of kind of what we do. So the first step is a prospective client contacts me via email, typically about mixing their project, getting some details, getting some pricing, introduction, right? The first thing I ask any prospective client, anyone, I want to hear a rough mix or a rough something, an MP3 file of the song or songs that we're talking about that the client wants to do. So I'll say to them, look, you don't have to do a mix, just throw up the faders and just send it to me. Just do a quick MP3, send it to me. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to have a bunch of effects on it if you don't want. I just want to hear, what am I dealing with? Why? Because I'm listening for a few things. I'm listening for the quality of the recording. I'm listening for the quality of the musicianship. I want to know if there's any immediate problems that jump out at me. Things that are going to make this project a nightmare. Things like vocals are seriously out of tune. Not there's a note here or there, but the vocals need heavy tuning. The timing, the drumming, the timing, the band, sloppy, can't play in time. Something that I know is going to take hours of beat detective work to try to get things to sound like it sounds like a band knows what they're doing. I want to hear the quality of the recording. It doesn't have to be done in a multi-million-dollar studio. You can record amazing quality stuff at home in your little home studio. So it's not about working with people that don't do home recordings. No, most of the stuff I do are home recordings. But how is the quality of the recording? Are there any immediate problems that are going to be big? Things that are going to require hours of either my time or hours of their time. And I'll talk a little bit about what I do and won't do for my mixing rate. So based on what I hear, I would say about 20% of the people, I choose to not take on the project. I don't even go to step number 2. I will politely decline in a professional way. I'm not going to criticize their music or criticize their production. I'm not going to do that. That's not right. It's not fair. It's not polite. But I will decline the work. So I would say about 20% of the people that contact me, I don't take on the job. And it's because I'm hearing something or there's something in that production, or I just know from experience that it's going to be a nightmare to mix. It's going to be a nightmare, and I'm going to spend more time fixing than mixing, and I don't get involved in any of that, and we'll talk about that. So that's step 1, is I want to listen to the rough, I want to listen to the project, I only want to take on things that are decently recorded, timing is pretty good, doesn't need a lot of fixing or any at all, vocals are not completely crazy out of tune, decent quality production that is close to being mix ready, and we'll talk about that in a bit, okay? So if I decide that, yeah, this is something I'd like to interview for, I'd like to talk to the client more, I think I'm interested, let's go to the next step. So step 1, if you're taking on projects that are a nightmare to mix and a nightmare to fix, that's red flag number 1, that you may be doing tons of recalls with that client at one point or another. So try to avoid that, at least I do, and it's worked good for me. It's not about how much money I can make and how many clients I have, it's the quality of clients. Here's kind of another kind of a thing that I kind of use as another data point for me. If I'm not willing to put a sample of their music when the mix is done on my website and my portfolio, I won't take on the project. Whether they allow me to do it or not, if I'm not willing to ask for their permission to show other prospective clients, here's a song that I worked on, for whatever reason, I'm not willing to take on that project, okay? So what happens if I am interested? If I am interested, I ask to set up a Zoom or a Skype call. I want to meet the client face to face. I will not, under any circumstances, take on work where everything is communicated in email. Don't do it, for many reasons. I don't charge them for this. For main reason number 1 is when you're going back and forth in email, sometimes detail gets lost, the tone of the emails, you don't know what to get. So much gets lost in detail and communication when you're trying to book something like a mixing job. And because I want to be detailed and do my due diligence and do my work on the front end so we don't have recalls, I need to do something beyond email. So I say to the client, I want to meet with you on Zoom or Skype. We need about 30 minutes. Doesn't cost you anything. I will work around their time zone so they don't have to work around my schedule. I will work around theirs. And if that means I have to get up at 11 o'clock in the evening and come down to my studio to meet with a client because they're in a different time zone, I'm willing to do it. If I have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do it, I'm willing to do it. 30 minutes face to face. I want to have a face to face meeting. Even if they decide not to hire me, it doesn't cost them anything. Now, If a client is not, or a prospective client is not willing to do that, can't do that, doesn't want to do that, doesn't feel comfortable doing that, immediately move on. I politely decline the project, okay? Again, why do I want to meet face-to-face? Because I want to make sure when you have a face-to-face conversation, I want to make sure that it's a good fit for me and for them, that I'm a good fit for them, they're a good fit for me, okay? I want to discuss their expectations. What are their expectations in finer detail? I want to know, what is the client expecting out of this project, okay? What are we expecting? Because if you don't do that, and you don't know what the expectations are, and you don't know what's in their mind and what they're kind of wanting and communicating what kind of vibe they're looking for, what kind of sound they're looking for, you're mixing in the dark. And you have no idea what they're gonna like and what they're not gonna like. And what is that gonna do? It's gonna lead to multiple mix revisions and possibly multiple recalls. So by meeting in person, we get to know each other. I'm not just some dude out in cyberspace, and they're not just some dude or dudette out in cyberspace. We have a connection now. There's some personal connection there, even if we're not in the same room. So that's hugely important. If they're not willing to take on a meeting, then I just politely pass on the opportunity. And I've had that happen. I've had it happen where they just don't have any time to meet with me. Well, then we can't. If I'm gonna try to make your art, the art of music, your art sound the best that it can for you, to satisfy you, I need to have a conversation with you. So I highly recommend that you do that. I'm sure many of you do. Some of you may have not have thought of that. Some of you may just work through email and it works for you. It doesn't work for me. I want to know what's going on, okay? So as I said, during this call, we're talking about what is the client looking for? What kind of sound are they looking for? I always get a reference track, either of a mix that they kind of did or their rough mix that they're kind of happy with and they want me to push it over the finish line. I get their rough. If they don't have a rough and their music sounds like, I don't know, Rascal Flatts, okay, they're kind of a country rock band and they kind of have the Rascal Flatts vibe and they kind of want that sonic kind of thing. We talk about what's your favorite, what kind of song are you going for? I know this seems to a lot of you like basic 101, but to a lot of you, I'm sure it's probably the first time you're hearing some of these things. I want a reference track. I want to know, I want a roadmap to what I'm mixing. If you're mixing without reference tracks, you're doing yourself a disservice. And that's how I've been teaching it when I teach with plugins in the box. It's the same thing with analog. I want to know what kind of vibe are they going for. And then also at this time, if again, we're moving forward and the call's going well, then it'll always come up with what's your rate? How much do I charge? Now my rates are on my website and I have an FAQ section which talks about the main points of what I charge and what that includes. And usually they have read through that. If they haven't read through it before we take on the Zoom or the Skype call in the initial communication that I'm having with them, I will say to them, check out my sound samples on my website. I'm sure you did or you wouldn't be contacting me, and make sure you read my FAQs, because then it kind of lets them know kind of what I'm willing to do and not do for what amount of money. So we go over those things also in the Zoom call, and I want to make sure that they understand that. So my rate as of today, again, it's on my website, so I'm willing to say it, is $450 a song, up to 32 tracks. Anything over 32 tracks is $5 a track. That's what I charge, okay? So I do this because if I get a track with a session with 100 tracks in it, well, I gotta spend, could be a few hours, a couple of hours, comping it all down to getting it on the console. It's more to manage, so it takes longer, so I have to charge more for it. But it would be no different in the box. I would do the same thing. When I used to work all in the box and used to charge in the box, I would charge per tracks after a certain amount of tracks. It takes way longer to mix 100 tracks than it does 40, right? Obvious. So I'm charging more for that, okay? So I want to make sure that I'm being paid what I consider to be fair for my time, to make sure that I can spend the time that's required to do the job. I don't work by the hour, I work by the project, right? So that's what we do. Now, what doesn't my rate include? Well, my rate doesn't include heavy vocal tuning, meaning I'm not going to spend 3 hours on a lead vocal tuning it to death. This is why I want to listen to the rough in the session up front. I want to know. That's production work. That's not mixing work. Does that mean that I won't fix a line or a note here or there? Of course not. I use Melodyne. I will fix things as I hear them if they come up and they just need a quick little fix. But if you have a thing that's way out of tune, that's production, and I will make sure, hey, before we take this on, if you want me to do all the vocal tuning, that's not included in my mixing rate. That's an upcharge. Or I would recommend to them that they do it themselves or have somebody do it if they can. If they cannot and they need me to do it, I will do it, but I charge them for that time. Same thing with timing issues. Again, I'm not going to spend 3 hours in Beat Detective fixing a sloppy performance. Not going to do it. Like I said, if I hear that in the initial thing, we're not even at the Zoom call. I will politely decline. However, there are times where, yeah, I got to do some of that stuff and I will, but that's above and beyond my mixing rate. And again, I try not to take those projects on at all. I try to avoid that like the plague, to be completely honest. And most of the clients I work with don't have those kinds of issues. But again, if there's something slight that I need to fix, of course I'm going to fix it. That's part of the job. But I'm not going to do production work. I want to mix the record, not fix the record. Okay? So those are the things that I won't do. In my rate of $450, excuse me, that includes 3 mix revisions. And you say, well, what does that mean? So once we move forward and we're going to go ahead and we're going to book the session, if we get to that point, I do a mix, right? Get the session or the WAV files, however we work it out, and I do the mix. I send them the mix, right? They're going to listen to it. They're going to get back to me with some feedback, some notes, right? My goal is to make sure that by using the reference track, understanding what the client wants, making sure I understand their expectations, make sure they understand what is and is not included in the rate of mixing, I've already got ahead of any potential problems that could come up, at least the big ones, right? So I know by doing that and by talking with them, my goal is to get them at least on the first thing that they hear, 95% of what they want. So I want to get as close as humanly possible to the sound. And the only notes that I want to get back are, can you turn up this a little bit, turn that down a little bit, those kinds of things, simple, quick things. And because if you do all the preparation on the front end, that's usually all the mix notes that you should get if you're good at what you do. We'll talk about that as well. So I send them the first mix. They listen to it, they give me a handful of notes. And usually, at least in my experience, it's a handful at most. We're close. Great, that's mix revision number 1. I do those changes, I send it off to them. They can listen to it for, reasonable amount of time and get back to me, no problem. They want something else slightly changed, no problem. I'll make those changes, I send them, that's revision number 2. 98% of the time, with all the records that I've mixed over the years, and I'm sure there's lots of you guys out there that have mixed far more than me and far more high profile clients than me, but nevertheless, I can remember only a handful that have ever gone to a 3rd revision. Usually after the 2nd revision, we're done. Usually. Occasionally, they'll ask for a couple of more changes, or can you try this, and we'll go to the 3rd one, and then they'll figure out they didn't really want that, and we'll go back, that kind of thing. And that's totally cool. But anyway, let's say there's another set of notes. Now they got the 3rd revision, okay? So now they've listened to 4 mixes, the original, and 3 more mixes, 4 of them. So here's where you as an engineer have to well, number 1, this is obvious, you gotta be good at what you do. If you can't give a client what they're looking for in 4 mixes, don't blame the client, blame you. You gotta get better at what you're doing. Or you didn't do the front end, you didn't prepare, you didn't know what the client wanted. You didn't do the due diligence on the front end. You gave them something that was completely, took them by surprise, and therefore had to remix the record 3 and 4 times. But if you do your due diligence on the front end, you shouldn't have to do that. By the 3rd revision, the 4th mix, you should be there, okay? Again, most times it goes 2 revisions at the very most. Sometimes it's 3, but very rarely. Anyway, we go ahead and we give them the final mix, okay? When they sign off and say, yes, this is what I want, thank you so much, I love it. Great, awesome. I send them off the files that we agreed upon, WAV files, MP3s, you know, whatever they needed, stems, whatever the agreement was. I give them all their files. Thank you very much. Thanks for paying the bill. Love to work with you again in the future. If you need anything, let me know. Then I'm on to the next job, okay? If then, a week from now, that client wants me to recall the session because they want to turn down the background vocal a little bit because they didn't catch that in the first 4 mixes. Again, I don't remember ever having this happen to me, even in the box. But if it did, at the time of our Skype and our Zoom call, we talk about this. If after that you want me to do it, I can recall the console. I can spend 45 minutes doing it and we can make your change. It is a 2-hour minimum charge at $97 an hour. So it's gonna cost you about $200, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, for me to go back 2 weeks later, pull up all my gear, recall your session, rebounce everything and send it to you and wait for your feedback. Is it worth $200 to you? We didn't catch that in the first 4 mixes. Most times, you know, people are gonna say, oh, you know, very rarely does that need to be done. I've never had to have that done. It doesn't mean it will never ever happen, but I charge them for that time. It's the same thing when I was mixing in the box, even though it's all instantly recallable. If someone wants me now to spend, I wouldn't charge them for 2 hours that it was in the box, I may charge them for 1. But if you want me to take 30 or 40 minutes of my time to stop what I'm doing, recall a session, make your tweak, again, remind, this is after you've signed off the mix, after you've heard at least 3 to 4 revisions of it, and you said you were happy and I delivered you the files. If you want to go back now, we can go back. You're going to be charged for that time. Time is money. I'm running a business here. This is not a charity event here. This is how I make a living. My pricing is extremely fair for what I deliver, and I go above and beyond for every single client. I never say no to a client, ever. Whatever they want, I can make it happen. That's how you want to be as an engineer working with clients. Give them what they want. But there also has to be a level of expectation, going back to the Zoom call, to make sure they understand that this is not unlimited revisions, and this is not, I can just recall this thing any single time. I charge them for that time. And therefore that avoids the recall. And as I said, I have never had anyone come back to me a month later telling me that they needed to recall something, whether it was analog, which again, I haven't done that many mixes with clients yet, but I've done enough of them, or in the box, never. Never. Because I believe that by doing all the front end preparation, you avoid that kind of stuff from happening. You avoid the bad client. You avoid those kinds of things. Not that there could be bad clients from time to time. But as I said a little earlier, if you're unable to give a client what they need in 4 mixes, then they're not the problem. You're the problem. I'm the problem, right? You either got to get better at what you do at the craft, or you have to do a better job understanding what the client wants. You really, really, truly do. Now, that's how I avoid recalls. I don't do recalls. I can, but I try not to do them at all costs. And so far, it's been successful because I do so much preparation on the front end that when I give them that very first mix, it is as close to what they want as I could humanly get it. The recall stuff, it just doesn't become an issue. So for me, spending an extra $100,000 on a desk that would give me that ability, to me, I don't need to do it. I don't want to have to do recalls. Don't want to have to do it. It's not part of the game. Now, there'll be somebody that will say, well, you know, if you're working, and again, if you're working in the music business where you're mixing Taylor Swift records, or Rascal Flat records, I don't know why I'm on this country kick today, and that's the kind of work that you're doing, and you're being paid accordingly, yes, there is an expectation at that level that Taylor Swift needs to be able to come in 6 months from now and put something else on her session if she wants. And she has that right, and if that's what Taylor Swift wants, that's what Taylor Swift's gonna get. But if you're working with that kind of client with those kinds of budgets, you're not getting paid $400 to mix a song, you're getting paid a lot more than that. Then you don't want an Origin. You don't want this. You don't want any desk that has to be manually recalled. You want something like a Duality. You want something that, yes, even call assist gets me to recall the board in 15 minutes instead of 45. That's what you want. You want the flying faders to get all the fader positions. You want all of that. That makes total sense to me. I don't work with those kinds of clients. If I do one day, then yes, this will be upgraded to something where recall is a real necessity. But for most of us, and for most people watching my little old channel, and for me, you're not working with those kinds of clients, and neither am I. So guess what? If you get the right client, pick the right projects, be willing to turn down the projects that could potentially be a nightmare, and if you're good at what you do, and the expectations are clear on both ends, and you have the ability to go back and recall if you need to, but with the understanding of that they're gonna be charged for it, and also the understanding that they only get 3 mix revisions, it's not unlimited revisions, it just isn't. Because if you give someone unlimited revisions, guess what? You'll be working on that thing for a month, tweaking everything a half a dB. Forget it. If you want to avoid those kinds of jobs like the plague. Now, it doesn't mean that sometimes you have unreasonable clients and there's some unreasonable demands. That is gonna happen. It's not a complete perfect world. But I could tell you for me, recalls are not an issue. They weren't when I was working in the box, and they're not on this, and they're not gonna be on this. And if I have to go back and do it, I will do it, because my job is to give the client what they want and be the yes man and not the no man. But you gotta make sure that you're prepared and you know what you're doing, okay? So like I said, we'll do a video where I actually show you the recall process. It does take about, like I said, about 40 minutes or so, because I haven't done very many of them. I've done them as practice. I've never done one for a client yet. I've done it as practice to know how to do it, and I have a process. But again, my goal is not to speed up that process to get it down to 15 minutes. My goal is to never have to do it. Now, that's just because that's the kind of people that I work with and where I am at this point in my career. And if it ever gets to the point where I need to be able to do that, I need to be able to do that. Now, some people will say, and then we'll wrap up this video so I can let all the haters start writing their comments. Some people will say, well, wait a minute, Dave, you send them a mix. How long before they get back to you to tell you what they want as far as their changes? Your board is completely tied up. You can't work on anything else. That's correct, you can't. But guess what? I don't have that problem, because you know what I'm doing while the board is sitting kind of idle? I'm already in the box workstation on another computer prepping the next session. So when it's ready to come to the console, there's no DAW work to do. I could do all my editing, all my track cleaning, any light tuning, anything that I need to do in the DAW, I do on a separate computer, editing, anything I need to do. So when it comes here, it goes on the console and we're mixing, we're not fixing. So if I'm waiting for 24 hours or for 48 hours for a client to get back to me, and that's about what it is at most. And again, expectations on the front end. Tell the client, I send you a mix. You don't have 2 weeks to tell me whether you like it or not. If I give you a mix, within 48 hours, you should be able to give me your changes. Now again, in the circumstances where that's not possible for a client, this is why I have the video chat with them. And we talk about it up front, and I understand they're traveling or whatever. Dave, I need more than that time. I build it into the time of doing the project. I build it into my schedule. So I understand the expectations they have of me, and they understand the expectations, and they understand that I'm waiting for you. I can't move forward until you get back to me. But that doesn't keep me from working. I'm already working on the next client project in my DAW, already setting up the session, already setting it up. So it doesn't matter to me that the console may sit idle for a day or two. It's okay. I have other work that I can do. It doesn't stop me from moving forward. If you only had this, that could be a problem. I get it, but I have 2 rigs, so it doesn't bother me. It doesn't matter to me at all. It's never been a problem yet. Okay, so that's how it is. So anyhow, we'll do a video on how we actually do the recall when it needs to be done. But that's how I don't worry about recall. That's why I'm not worried about that the SSL Origin doesn't have recall. Would it be nice to have? It'd be wonderful to have. Who wouldn't want that? But I'm not gonna spend 3 times the money to get the feature that I don't really ever use. And that's the big one. And that's the big one. So, and again, if none of that stuff makes sense to you and you're just like, I just want to deal with it in the box, I don't ever want to have to deal with any of that, well then, this is not for you anyway. You should be in the box. And there's nothing wrong with being in the box. Like I've said 50,000 times on this channel, but some people don't seem to get it. Anyway, thanks so much for taking the time and listening to me bend your ear a little bit. I hope you got a few things out of that if you work with clients. and that it helps you in some way. If you have any questions, or you can always email me and you know, let me know, hey, I'm working with a client, but I have this situation, what would you do? I can maybe help with you. I deal with clients all the time. And so I've learned how to navigate that. And it is a skill. It is a skill, and it's super important. You want the client to be happy, you want them to be comfortable, and you want to be able to deliver what they want, when they want. And if you do your work on the front ends, you will be way more likely to not have any recall than have recall. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I've been Dave with Mixing Music Analog and mixingmusicanalog.com. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon. Take care, everybody.